Oklahoma scrimmages from their own 8-yard line. Jones drills the ball. Oh, it is intercepted. Amukamara. And he is still on his feet at the 10, inside the 5, and down to the 1.
What is up, Husker Nation? We are back for another Play the Fight Song fan perspective preview. This is the Nebraska corner, and it is Maryland Hate Week. One of the few teams Nebraska has never lost to in their time in the Big Ten, and that is the Maryland Terrapins. It is a team coming off of 4 straight losses, similar to Michigan State. They have not been able to find a win in a while, and that seemed to be beneficial against Michigan State on paper. However, that did not turn out the way we wanted it to. Nebraska's rolling in, like I said, off that loss to Michigan State in East Lansing 20-17, and Maryland is coming off of a loss at home against Penn State 51-15. We'll dive into their schedule in just a second, but my initial thoughts on that 51-15 game after going back and watching a bit of it, just to kind of get an identity for who Maryland is so I can then share it with you and you can know what to expect from the Terrapins. They're weird, man. I mean, it's a team that stacks their schedule. Maryland and Rutgers are both this style of team that stack their schedule early in the year. They end up 5-0, 4-1, 6-0 sometimes. And then they drop 5 or 6 straight and end up in the Pinstripe Bowl or something like that. Don't get me wrong. Right now, that sounds like, hey, maybe that's not so bad of a plan. I would like to go to a bowl. As you can see on the screen, I would like to go to a bowl. I think we're all at that point that we can agree that that is main priority and would deem this season a success. It would be just gravy to beat Iowa or Wisconsin or both to end the year. But this is a big one for Nebraska. I think everybody knows that. So let's start off by taking a look at the Terrapins and kind of what they come in with and what they've seen this year. Take a look at their schedule. Their wins on their schedule, obviously, the first 5 weeks: Towson, Charlotte, Virginia, Michigan State, and Indiana. They did beat Michigan State 31-9. I believe it was the week after Mel Tucker scandal, and they took it to him. So I don't want to look too much into that because it's the Big Ten, and the Big Ten this year is so bad across the board that I can't say honestly that scares me that they took it to them, only gave up 9 to Michigan State and we gave up 20. Like, I still think we're better defensively. And that was a long time ago. Like, teams are much different now than they were in week 5 when that matchup happened. They did take down Indiana 44-17, who just beat Wisconsin. But like I said, Big Ten beats everybody this year. It's similar to the NFL. It's kind of weird how this year has gone for the Big Ten in general. So I don't want to overlook or look too far into each game. So that's their wins. Their losses came from 2 top teams in college football, Ohio State and Penn State. I don't want to take anything away from those losses. I mean, they did get blasted, but so did we by Michigan. Ohio State handled them, and then Penn State obviously just took it to them last week, 51-15 in their house. So that's a good thing that we're playing at home this week. Maryland's 1-2 in road games this year. It's only their 4th road game of the year. I think it's a winnable game, but there's going to be some question marks around both the defense and then obviously if our offense can be somewhat capable or not. So taking a look at Maryland on the offensive side of the football first, obviously you got to mention what their entire offense basically is based on, and that is quarterback. And I'm going to do my best through this video on this pronunciation. I know everybody messes it up, and the only people that really have it down are commentators that have covered it multiple times. But Taulia Tagovailoa, he is one of the better players in the country, one of the better quarterbacks in the Big Ten, if not the best all-rounded quarterback in the Big Ten. He just found himself at Maryland, University of Maryland, who is not known for just turning and burning NFL athletes or Heisman Trophy winners or anything like that. It's just Maryland football. That's pretty much all they are. So, but he's splendid. Talia, he's 218 for 335 this year, over 2,400 passing yards, 21 touchdowns, and 7 picks. Man, 21 passing touchdowns sounds great, doesn't it? And that doesn't even mention what he can do on the ground. He obviously offers a dual threat. He's great at scrambling on the pocket, which makes me a little nervous because Nebraska struggled with Hudson Card in that manner. I thought Hudson Card was really, really good at avoiding the sack and getting out of the pocket, and Tagovailoa does a really good job at that too. So that'll be a main focus for Nebraska is when they do get in the backfield, either to have some sort of spy run or something like that to contain him on the outside from extending plays too far. And in the backfield, Roman Hemby, is the leading carrier there, 93 carries, 441 yards, 4 scores. Not a guy that you see very often. They're a pass-first team. The run, it doesn't really kill teams when they play against Maryland. They're successful when they run both of them, if they give you a read option look. But it's not a guy that's going to really take over this game. And especially I have the utmost confidence in Nebraska's run defense, who had a down week last week and still gave up only 63 yards rushing. So not too worried about the backs for Maryland. The other back you might see is Colby McDonald, 38 carries, 261 yards, 2 scores. Obviously not a very impactful player, but somebody you might see split time with Hemby in the backfield. I just should mention before I get to the outside, the important part of this Terps offense, injuries from last week, not too impactful of players, but running back Roman Brown, who's only had a couple of carries this year, he's questionable and doubtful. And then wide receiver Ryan Manning. They have so many wide receivers that kind of jump off the stat sheet because of how their offense runs that I wouldn't be too concerned if I was Maryland that Ryan Manning is the guy that went down. So those are the two guys from last week that are listed as questionable. I think they're both going to be doubtful in this situation. And it won't hurt Maryland across the board with these two guys being out if they do not play. Nebraska, their injuries. We will be interested to see if Billy Kemp goes again this week. I think he didn't go last week. He just caught punts. But we'll be interested to see if he's in a little bit bigger of a role this week. And then you're supposed to get, Marcus Buford played last week. We'll see how many snaps he's limited to. And then I don't remember any notable injuries from last week that are going to keep guys out. But we'll see if those two play a bigger role. To the outside on Maryland, going back to their offense, two guys I really want to highlight that are all over the field all the time, and their stats are going to be like, whoa, compared to our wide receivers, but it's a team that throws the ball at a much higher percentage of their plays than Nebraska does. Those two are Jayshon Jones, 40 receptions, 500 yards, actually over 500 yards, four touchdowns, and he averages 13.1 yards per catch. We cannot give up 13.1 yards per catch. We cannot do that. If we do that, we will find ourselves in a big hole with Maryland. That is what they want to do to you. So that's a guy to avoid on the outside. I think Q will be on him most of the day. I haven't seen elite coverage from Tommy Hill the past couple of weeks. I know he's had his picks, but he gets beat, and he gets beat often. And when you have an elite quarterback like Tagovailoa back there, you really can't have those all over the field all the time. We kind of saw it last week. Tommy Hill got beat a few times, especially on that middle crossing route, and that was one of their scores. That was their first score, I believe, in the football game. So it'll be interesting. I think Q for up Jones the most of the day. Caden Prather, I'm going to say it's Prather. I'm probably not Prather, but Caden Prather, 33 receptions, 484 yards, 14.7 yards per catch. If you're getting the hint here, Maryland throws the football down the field more oftentimes than not. They're not going to run those 5-6 yard slant dump off routes. They're trying to beat you down the field. It's a team that wants to create big plays. And a Nebraska defense who's coming off a week where they gave up multiple 25-yard passing plays, and those all resulted in scores for Michigan State. So I don't want to say priority number one because I'll get into that for Nebraska's defense, but priority number two is limiting big plays. And I think we can all agree if this Nebraska defense limits big plays, they're pretty successful in the game, and they really open up opportunities for what seems to be incapable offense, and we'll get into them as well. But that's priority number two, is limiting those big plays on the outside from those two guys in particular. On the defensive side of the ball, Maryland's got okay players. They're not really a team that jumps off the paper. Defensively, 10th in the Big Ten in total defense. Two guys I want to highlight: senior Bo Braid, 50 tackles, 31 solo, 5 pass breakups, and an INT. He is obviously in the defensive backfield, and he's a guy that I assume will cover up one of our receivers. I don't think any of them are elite enough to say that he'll be on him, but he's a guy that you might see make an impact this week. And then on the defensive line, Donnell Brown, 22 tackles, 12 solo, 3 sacks. He is their sack leader on the defensive line. It's a guy that we have to handle this week. Our offensive line had a down week last week, and if we have a similar style play this week, I think we can get beat, and Brown would be one of those guys that would make an impact in that area. So have to limit him on the defensive line. Taking a look back at the offense quickly, their rankings and where they're at in the Big Ten, it's a third overall offense in the Big Ten. So you're asking a lot from the Black Shirts, especially with what our offense have given us. Again, I think, and I talked about this in my recap of the Michigan State game. If you haven't seen it, go back and watch it. But we can't sit here and say that our defense lost us the game. And I don't think there's many people out there saying that, but there's people out there saying that they didn't play very good or they had a down week. If giving up 20 points on the road is a down week, then that's called an embarrassment of riches, folks. Like, that is a good week. Like, you're asking your team to score 3 touchdowns and you couldn't get it done. So I think the Blackshirts don't need to bounce back. They just need to take maybe that extra peg against this more high-powered Maryland offense than what Michigan State was. So I look for the Blackshirts to make an impact in this game. They'll be what pretty much sets the pace and determines whether or not we can win once again. That's the 4th ranked scoring offense in the Big Ten, and I'll give you a good guess on who's the 3 in front of them. That would be Maryland. I mean, it would be Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State, and then Maryland's ranked on that list. So that tells you it's a tall task, but I think they can get it done. I have a lot of confidence in Tony White and the adjustments that he'll make this week, and we'll let this dive us right into Nebraska's defense, I guess. Keys to the game for Nebraska's defense after taking a look at Maryland's offense and kind of what they come at you with. One thing is they're going to hard count a lot. It's a team that I saw multiple times last week get Penn State on some offside jumps, and then they got free play, threw the ball down the field, and were successful with it. So I think it'll be important for the defensive line to watch the football, not get penalized, and play a clean game like they did last week. But it's going to be a team where you're going to see a few hard counts, and if they get us once or twice, they're going to take advantage of it. So that's something to watch out for. And then the defensive line is priority number 1 for Nebraska. They have to create pressure. When I talked about whether or not Talia is going to be able to scramble out of the pocket, good. Make him scramble out of the pocket and extend plays, put a spy on, and that's how you'll be successful against this Maryland offense. He does get sacked a lot. He got sacked 6 times 2 weeks ago, and he got sacked 5 times this past week against Penn State. We can put pressure on him, but Nebraska really struggled to do that with Michigan State. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what blitz packages Tony White develops for Maryland this week. I think it's going to be a huge area of the game for Nebraska's defense to truly make a difference and get Nebraska's offense back on the field to eat up some of that clock. So that is priority number 1, creating pressure, make Talia make mistakes, take sacks, all that good stuff. Because he is a guy that when he throws interceptions, he doesn't throw many of them in comparison to the amount of throws that they take per game. But when he does get pressure, he is obviously much worse, as most quarterbacks are, but that is when he makes his mistakes. He'll either take a sack or he'll throw something ill-advised and will hopefully intercept it. So that's priority number 1 for the defense. Priority number 2 is when those plays are extended. I already said priority number 2, covering the deep ball. So priority number 3 would be to when those plays do get extended, to keep coverage. You can't get beat. It's really hard. It's a tall task to ask from a defensive back is to stay on your guy for more than 5 to 7 seconds, but it's something that they're going to have to do because that's who this Maryland quarterback is Tagovailoa is going to extend those plays, and if you're not ready to go, and if you're not on his guy, he'll find somebody downfield late in the play. So those are the 3 main keys I think Nebraska defense needs to execute to be successful this weekend. And I think they're more than capable of it, and I think Memorial Stadium will be behind them. I think it's a huge benefit. This is going to be a home game, so make sure if you're down there to be rocking. I will not be. This will be one of my only missed home games of the year because I will be traveling for my day job. This isn't my job, folks. I'm just a passionate fan that you're listening to, hopefully. So I will not be there. I will be in Arizona watching the game at 9 a.m. So it'll be 9 a.m. Arizona time. I'll be there. I'll be ready to go. Peacock. So if you're spending your $7, be loud on the couch because I think it will make an impact in this game. And we got to go bowling. Simple as that. We just got to get there. So let's go back to Maryland's team rankings. And this is where I'll start to compare Nebraska to them in areas that I think hold the most different. Honestly, the teams are pretty similar on paper, and that's where the line is where it is. If not, Maryland's a more impressive team on paper. But with the strength of schedule that they had at the beginning of the year versus ours, I mean, our first 3 games of the year were Minnesota, Colorado, and NIU, and there's where Towson, Charlotte, and Virginia. And if you haven't watched Virginia, if you think, oh, that's a Power 5 opponent, is it? You should take a look at some Virginia highlights from this year because they're not good. Maybe possibly the worst Power 5 team in the country. So I don't want to look too much into the stats. I think they might be a little padded from their easy schedule, but they average 30.7 points per game. So like I just covered, we have to limit them on defense and keep our offense on the field, which our offense doesn't do a very good job at. And we averaged 19.2. It went down 0.3 points after last week, and the debacle that Michigan State was on offense, especially towards the end of the game. I know some calls didn't go our way, but still, it wasn't good enough. It just flat out isn't good enough. The performance that we're getting, I think the only couple of performances that we got that are good enough with the pace we play at, maybe Purdue, but that was only 24 points, and then maybe NIU, but NIU is just not a very good football team. So those are the two games that we need to play like to have success in this game. I think Nebraska scoring 24 will be a must to take a win here. So it'll be important for the offense, which we'll dive into. But passing the attempts is where the big difference is here. Maryland has attempted to pass the football 349 times this year to Nebraska's 188. Like I said, they're a pass first team, but that is a huge differential. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what schemes Loxley comes up with rolling into Lincoln to see if they want to nickel and dime us like teams has had success doing, or they're going to stick with chucking the ball down the field and hoping that Nebraska's secondary can't come through. I think Isaac Gifford will play a huge role at that jack position. He can't get beat deep over the middle because that's where they're going to try and beat you most of the time. So that'll be an important spot. And then on the rushing side of things, Maryland has 1,054 rushing yards this year to Nebraska's 1,651. So we dominate them when it comes to rushing the football. But like I said, they pass a lot more than they run. And so you're going to see two teams trying to play separate games, completely identification games on each own side. It's going to be Nebraska running the football a ton, which they should have done more last week. I agree. And then Maryland's going to be airing it out. So we could use some wind, Mother Nature. We could use some of that. I think that helped us against Purdue. So I'll take some of that again, especially since I'm not going to be there and get some more cold sores and maybe a cold that I had earlier this week. So if I'm not going to be there, you can make it as windy as you want, but be loud if you are there. Offensive ranks. Maryland averages 117 rushing yards per game and 280 through the air. To Nebraska's 185 on the ground and 131 through the air. Obviously, Maryland has the better offense on paper. I don't think you're going to find many teams that don't have a better offense on paper than Nebraska. So I'm going to make it the theme of this video, but big week for the black shirts. I'm going to put them in the tag of this video, the photo of this video. Big week for the black shirts. We need them to come through, and I think we can find success against this team. But that's pretty much it. That's the story on Maryland, what you need to know. It's a winnable game. It's a team that's 5-4 overall and 2-4 in the conference. They've lost to teams that we've beat. They lost to Illinois and Northwestern, two teams that we beat pretty handily. So it's not like a situation where, oh, well, they beat Michigan State handily and they beat Indiana. But yeah, but they also lost to two teams that we've already beat. It's the Big Ten. Everybody beats everybody. It's an NFL style this year, I guess. So with that, let's dive into Nebraska and kind of what they need to do to find success this week. I don't think many of you out there are clueless enough to not agree with me on most of these points, but Nebraska has to run the football effectively. After watching Maryland last week against Penn State, I think Nebraska can find success on the edge yet again. I hope they let Emmett get down there. I think he's a little bit quicker of a back. I haven't seen enough successful runs from Anthony Grant. He had a couple last week towards the beginning of the game, but Emmett's the guy. I think Emmett is the guy. He protects the ball really well. He runs downhill, but we can get him to the outside. I will say that Maryland struggled on camera with the read option last week, which is good for us because we run it about 6 plays, and that's how we set up our play action. So I believe Heinrich will have a good chance to take advantage of that. So the run game is obviously very important, but the offensive line starts up front, just like Rule says, just kind of the identity that he's built. And then I didn't think the play calling was too terrible last week. I thought we threw the ball one too many times when we were running successfully, but I'd like to see a little bit different style from Satterfield this week in play calling when it comes to controlling the clock and keeping Maryland's offense off the field. So that's where I see Nebraska's offense. Young receivers stepping up. I'd like to see it. Jalen Lloyd had probably the worst stat line I've ever seen last week. Malachi Coleman had a couple of big catches. Alex Bullock had a couple of nice catches. Had a bad drop. So they just need to take advantage of what Maryland gives them on defensively. And that's kind of a lot. Maryland's defense isn't very good. So I think Fedoni can have a big day. It's a name you should watch out for to have a couple more catches for long distances and possibly a couple scores would be great. I mean, 3 or 4 touchdowns sounds like 26.2 miles to this team, but it's very reachable against this Maryland defense. Defensively for Nebraska, we've kind of said what we need to say. They need to create pressure. They need to cover guys downfield, and they need to shorten the extended plays. They need to. Well, it comes down to just limiting Tagovailoa, and you'll find success against Maryland. That's literally their entire offense runs through him, and most people know that. But that is the main key to this game for Nebraska is to do that, and they will win the football game. I promise you that. We can limit turnovers on our end. Again, Heinrich had 3 of them last week. He had a fumble and 2 picks. I don't think this isn't a Maryland team that forces a ton of turnovers. They have a couple guys in the defensive backfield that are near the top of the conference in interceptions. But if we go according to the game plan that I think we will, and that's that slow pace running game, then it won't be a problem. So all in all, I think Nebraska. I hope I don't have to eat my words twice in a row, but I think Nebraska takes this one. I think they're going to give up 3 scores. Maryland's offense is a lot, but I think they end up taking it. I'm going to take Nebraska in this one, 27-21. I think Nebraska's offense is going to find it finally. I think they're going to be pissed off about last week. I think Rule will have the guys right, and they'll get to 27 this week, which feels like 57 for this team. But I think they'll get it done on offense this week a little better. I don't want to say they'll get it done completely, but they'll do a little bit better and get us to that 27 mark. Maybe off of a turnover to have some points would be nice. But I think Nebraska gets it done in general, and they hold Maryland to those 3 touchdowns. Their field goal kicker is not very good. He's like 9 for 15 or 9 for 17, something like that. And he's terrible outside of 40 yards. So I think Nebraska gets it done at home. That's the important part. If you're there, be loud, and that'll do it. I'll see you after the game for a recap, and that will come out on Monday, probably Monday evening. But we'll wrap it all up. If you have a comment, something I missed on, something you completely agree, if you're like, this guy's a moron, and you made it all the way to the end of the video, drop a comment. Let me know I'm a moron. I'll bring you on. We'll talk about it. I love this. I love Nebraska football. So do you, and that's why you're here. Go Big Red.